There is a moment that Jung described as the most dangerous in the life of a highly sensitive person. It is not when they suffer. It is not when they cry. It is not when they are betrayed. It is when they stop forgiving. Andrew Huberman spent years studying what happens in the brain at this exact moment, and what he discovered explains why this transformation is permanent. The person who emerges after this moment is not who you knew. It is something completely different, something that terrifies those left behind. Today you will understand why Jung called this the most dangerous phenomenon of the human psyche, and why Huberman scientifically proved there is no way back. If you are a highly sensitive person or know someone like this, pay close attention, because what I'm about to reveal could completely change how you understand yourself, or how you understand that person who suddenly seemed to change completely. For decades, researchers ignored a disturbing pattern that appeared repeatedly in their studies. Highly sensitive people spend years forgiving, years and years forgiving lies that should have been confronted, forgiving betrayals that deserved consequences, forgiving abandonments that shattered pieces of their soul, forgiving carelessness that hurt deeply, forgiving words that cut like knives. And then, one day, something inside them breaks. It is not a conscious decision. It is not a rational choice. It is something much deeper than any decision. Carl Jung mapped this moment in his extensive studies on the human shadow. He observed that when someone who always forgave finally stops, there is a complete psychic reversal, a reversal so profound that the person becomes unrecognizable. The shadow that was sleeping awakens, and it awakens hungry, with a hunger that accumulated during all those years of silence. Huberman confirmed this in recent neuroimaging studies. The prefrontal cortex that normally regulates emotions enters a completely altered state. The empathy circuits that previously functioned automatically shut down, and the self-protection circuits that were suppressed for years activate at full force, as if they finally had permission to exist. The most frightening thing is that this change happens at the neural level. It literally remodels the brain's architecture, creates new connections, weakens the old ones. That is why Jung said this moment was the most dangerous. Not dangerous for others, dangerous because the person stops being who they were, and there is no known way to return. To understand what happens when the highly sensitive person stops forgiving you, first need to deeply understand what it means to be highly sensitive. Researcher Elaine Aron coined the term highly sensitive person in 1996 after years of research. She discovered that approximately 15 to 20% of the world's population has a neurological trait called sensory processing sensitivity. It is not a disease. It is not a disorder. It is a genetic characteristic as valid as eye color or height. This means that the brains of these people process information significantly more deeply than most. They feel more intensely, notice more details, and absorb more from the environment around them. Everything in greater quantity and with greater intensity. Huberman explained in his neuroscience podcasts that this happens because the nervous system of these people has a much lower threshold for stimulation. What for a normal person would be an insignificant comment they would forget in minutes, for the highly sensitive person is a complete emotional experience that can last days. They pick up on microfacial expressions that others do not even notice. They perceive subtle changes in tone of voice that go unnoticed by most. They sense the energy of an environment before even consciously processing what is happening, and they frequently know something is wrong before having any concrete evidence. For a long time, this characteristic was seen as weakness by society. Highly sensitive people were called dramatic, exaggerated, too sensitive, as if feeling deeply were a defect to be corrected. But Jung had a completely different view. He saw highly sensitive people as having privileged access to the collective unconscious. They function as living antennas that pick up signals that most people simply cannot perceive. And this extraordinary capacity comes with an equally extraordinary price. The price is feeling absolutely everything with amplified intensity. When a highly sensitive person is hurt, they do not only feel the pain of the present moment, they feel the pain in multiple simultaneous layers. The pain of what was explicitly said, the pain of what was implied between the lines, the pain of what that means about the nature of the relationship, the pain of what that means about their value as a person. and perhaps the worst pain of all, the pain of knowing that the other person probably did not even notice the devastating impact of what they did, that for them it was just a moment. While for the highly sensitive person it was an internal earthquake. Because of this overwhelming emotional intensity, highly sensitive people develop a very specific survival mechanism throughout their lives. They forgive. Forgive quickly. Forgive completely. Forgive before even fully processing what happened. Sometimes forgive before even feeling the pain completely. This is not weakness, despite what society says. It is an absolutely necessary neurological survival strategy. If they kept every hurt at its full intensity, without ever releasing their nervous system, would completely collapse. It would be impossible to function, so the brain automatically learns to release, to let go, to forgive, in order to keep living, and this pattern repeats thousands and thousands of times throughout an entire life. Here is what Jung discovered in his clinical observations, and what Huberman later confirmed with modern neuroscience. The forgiveness of the highly sensitive person is not a complete release as it appears to be. It is a transfer, a silent and invisible transfer. Every time they consciously forgive, the hurt does not disappear. It is moved to a deeper place, to the shadow. Jung defined the shadow as the part of the psyche that contains everything we reject about ourselves, everything we do not want to see, everything we cannot accept. But he also observed something crucial. The shadow stores what we cannot fully process. And for the highly sensitive person who forgives automatically to survive, this means years and years of hurts accumulated in the depths. Hurts that were never truly processed, only transferred, only hidden. Imagine an invisible reservoir at the bottom of the mind. Every forgiveness adds a drop. Every apology accepted without true repair adds more drops. Every time they swallowed what they wanted to say and smiled instead of confronting, more drops accumulate. Every time they pretended everything was fine when it was not, the reservoir rises a little more. The reservoir fills silently over the years. No one sees, no one notices. Sometimes not even the highly sensitive person themselves is aware of what is happening inside them. On the outside, the person seems perfectly fine. They continue forgiving as they always have. Continue being understanding with everyone. Continue being the person everyone knows as patient and loving. The person who never holds grudges. The person who always gives another chance. The person who understands everyone's side. But inside, something fundamental is changing, slowly and invisibly. Huberman explained the precise biological mechanism behind this. Cortisol, the stress hormone, has cumulative effects on the brain over time. Every time the highly sensitive person suppresses an authentic emotional reaction in order to forgive and move on, cortisol is released, even if they do not consciously notice. Even if they believe they have already overcome it, the body registers, the brain registers. Over time, this repeated cortisol begins to physically alter the neural structure. The amygdala, which is the part of the brain responsible for detecting threats, becomes progressively more sensitized. It begins to register threats in situations that previously seemed completely safe. The internal alarm system becomes more and more activated, and the prefrontal cortex that normally regulates these reactions and maintains calm becomes increasingly exhausted, overloaded by the constant effort of suppressing legitimate reactions. And then at some point that day arrives. It can be something apparently small that triggers it. A comment that at another time would have been forgiven automatically without even thinking. An attitude that would normally have been understood and justified. A disappointment that would previously have been absorbed and forgotten in a few days. But the reservoir is too full to the brim after years of accumulating. And this last apparently insignificant drop makes everything overflow at once. Jung described this moment as the violent eruption of the shadow. He used specific terms like nigredo and tenebrositas to describe what happens internally. These are terms from medieval alchemy, meaning darkness and deep shadows. Jung was not being dramatic or poetic. It was a precise clinical description of what the person experiences at this moment. The highly sensitive person who spent their entire life being light for everyone else suddenly encounters their own darkness. And this darkness is not small. It is not a passing discomfort. It is proportional to all the light that was given over years. proportional to all the forgiveness that was offered, proportional to all the patience that was exercised. It is an immense darkness that frightens the person themselves. Huberman explained in detail what happens in the brain at this critical moment. There is a drastic and measurable change in neurotransmitters. Serotonin, which normally promotes feelings of well-being and social connection with others, drops drastically. Dopamine, which motivates approach behaviors and seeking social reward, also decreases significantly. And simultaneously, there is a massive increase in amygdala activity. The entire brain enters total protection mode, a mode that probably had never been activated with this intensity before. And this protection mode includes a complete and merciless re-evaluation of all past experiences. Suddenly, the person begins to see patterns they had carefully ignored before. Patterns that were there all along, but that they chose not to see. They perceive with brutal clarity that they were used, perceive that their kindness was systematically exploited, perceive that their automatic forgiveness was interpreted as tacit permission to continue hurting, perceive that every time they forgave without demanding real change, they taught the other that they could continue. And this devastating realization does not come gradually, little by little. It comes like an avalanche that buries everything. It comes all at once. All memories reinterpreted simultaneously. All moments reviewed under a new, merciless light. Jung called this the confrontation with the shadow, the most transformative and dangerous moment of human psychological development. He repeatedly warned in his writings that this confrontation is extremely dangerous. Dangerous because it can completely destroy the person who existed before. Dangerous because there is no guarantee of who will emerge on the other side. Dangerous because once the process begins, it cannot be reversed or paused. It follows its own course to the end. The highly sensitive person who enters this process does not come out the same. It is literally impossible to come out the same. Something dies in this process and something new is born. What exactly happens after the highly sensitive person stops forgiving? First comes the silence, a profound and disturbing silence for those who were accustomed to this person's open communication. People who knew this person as communicative and expressive suddenly find an impenetrable wall. They stop explaining their decisions, stop justifying their feelings, stop desperately trying to make others understand their perspective, stop wasting energy trying to be understood by those who never made an effort to understand. This silence is not passive-aggressive despite appearances. It is not a manipulation tactic. It is a conservation of vital energy. The brain that spent years and years expending immense resources on excessive empathy and understanding others now redirects all those resources to self-protection. Finally, Huberman explained that this represents a fundamental reorganization of neural circuits. The theory of mind circuits that allow understanding others' perspectives do not disappear. The capacity for empathy does not vanish, but these circuits cease to be automatic and compulsive. Now the person consciously chooses when to use this capacity, and most of the time they deliberately choose not to use it, because they learned that using it automatically almost destroyed them. After the silence comes the clarity, an almost frightening clarity in its intensity. The highly sensitive person who previously compulsively saw the best in everyone now sees the naked and raw truth. And the truth includes all the ugly parts they chose to ignore or justify. They see with surgical precision the manipulations they naively accepted as demonstrations of love. See the repeated exploitations they justified as the other's need or difficulty. See the deliberate cruelties they forgave as the other's momentary weakness. See the lies they pretended to believe to keep the peace. See the toxic patterns they fed with their infinite forgiveness. And this merciless vision does not awaken anger, does not awaken a desire for revenge. It awakens something much more disturbing for those observing from outside. It awakens absolute indifference. Jung described this as the successful integration of the shadow. When someone finally accepts their own internal darkness, they stop compulsively reacting to the darkness of others. There is no longer a need to forgive, because there is no longer a need to put themselves in situations that require forgiveness. The person simply removes from their life what they previously patiently tolerated, without drama, without long explanations, without endless discussions, without second chances, without third chances, without infinite chances. Huberman explained in scientific detail why this transformation is permanent and irreversible. The human brain fundamentally operates by efficiency. It does not maintain neural circuits that are not used regularly. It is a basic principle of neuroscience known as synaptic pruning. When the highly sensitive person spends months or years operating in the new protection mode, the old automatic forgiveness circuits begin to weaken from lack of use. The synaptic connections gradually dissolve, and simultaneously, the new protection circuits strengthen with each use. This is called neuroplasticity. The brain remodels itself based on what we do repeatedly, and it works in both directions. Just as the brain learned over years to forgive automatically, it now learns to protect itself automatically. And just as automatic forgiveness took many years to develop and become second nature, automatic protection also becomes second nature over time. Equally strong, equally automatic, equally difficult to reverse. Jung saw this as an absolutely necessary process of individuation. Individuation is the term Jung used for the process of becoming who you truly are, integrating all parts of yourself, including the shadow parts, and he firmly believed that the person needed to integrate their shadow to become truly complete. For the highly sensitive person who spent their entire life denying their own anger, their own frustration, their own sacred right to say no, this integration is absolutely revolutionary. It changes everything. For the first time in their life, they allow themselves to be what society would call selfish, allow themselves to prioritize their own needs without guilt, allow themselves to simply not care about people who never genuinely cared about them, allow themselves to exist for themselves and not just for others. And once they experience this profound freedom, it is impossible to want to go back, because going back would mean returning to suffering that way, returning to self-annihilation, returning to sacrificing themselves for those who do not deserve it. And the brain that now functions differently remembers very well the past suffering. It will not allow that to happen again. The protection system is permanently activated now. There is a predictable phenomenon that happens when the highly sensitive person stops forgiving. The people around them enter a state of shock. They simply no longer recognize who this person has become, and they frequently react with intense anger or accusations. Do you know why? Because for years these people silently benefited from the automatic forgiveness. They could be careless with their feelings, knowing they would eventually be forgiven. They could be occasionally cruel, knowing they would be understood and justified. They could completely ignore the emotional needs of this person, knowing they would remain present and available. They could give less than they received. They could demand much and offer little. They could be inconsistent and selfish, because there would always be forgiveness waiting for them. Now that has abruptly ended, and they have absolutely no idea how to deal with this new reality. Jung observed in his clinical practice that the people who most fiercely resist someone's transformation are precisely those who most benefited from the previous state. They will desperately try to make the person go back to who they were. They will use guilt as a weapon. They will say things like, "You used to be so kind." They will use sophisticated emotional manipulation. They will remind of all the good moments from the past. They will completely ignore what they did to cause the change. They will say this person has changed for the worse, that they were much better before, that they should go back to being the loving and understanding person everyone knew and loved. What they really mean is something different. They mean this person should go back to being someone they could comfortably exploit, someone they could treat badly without consequences, someone they could repeatedly disappoint without losing. But the transformed, highly sensitive person no longer responds to these manipulative tactics, because they finally see the tactics for exactly what they are: attempts at control, attempts to reverse the change that threatens their comfort, and they simply walk away, without explaining their reasons, without defending themselves against accusations, without trying to be understood by those who never wanted to understand. They simply leave, silently, definitively. And this is the most frightening thing for those left behind, because there is absolutely nothing to hold on to. No discussion to win, no argument to refute, no emotion to manipulate. The person is simply no longer available. Not for love, not for hate, not for anything. After the transformation is complete, who exactly emerges on the other side? Jung would say that the true self finally emerges, the authentic person who existed before all the adaptations, before painfully learning that they needed to forgive to survive, before erroneously believing their value depended on how much they could tolerate, before internalizing the message that being sensitive meant being weak. Huberman would explain the same phenomenon in precise neurological terms. A brain emerges that finally operates in true balance. That is no longer in a constant state of emotional hypervigilance, that no longer spends immense resources trying to anticipate and prevent conflicts that are not even theirs, that no longer exhausts itself trying to manage everyone's emotions around them. This person who emerges is not cold as it appears at first glance, is not cruel despite the accusations, is not incapable of loving deeply. They simply have very different standards now. Standards that should have existed from the beginning. They love deeply and intensely the people who have consistently proven to deserve that love. And they are completely and absolutely indifferent to everyone else. There is no longer the exhausting middle ground. There is no longer the constant effort to maintain relationships that drain vital energy. There is no longer infinite tolerance for behaviors that repeatedly hurt. The entire world is clearly divided into two simple categories: people who deserve their energy and their love, and people who do not deserve even their anger. The second category simply ceases to exist for them in emotional terms. They become irrelevant, not hated, just irrelevant. And this ability to simply erase people from their emotional reality is exactly what Jung considered dangerous. Not dangerous in the sense of physical violence, not dangerous in the sense of revenge, dangerous in the sense that it is an immense and transformative power. The absolute power to make someone completely irrelevant. To look at someone who was once extremely important and feel absolutely nothing. No residual love, no persistent hatred, no nostalgia, no hurt, just complete emptiness. As if the person had never existed in emotional terms. If you are listening to this and recognizing yourself or someone you know understand some important things. First, if you are a highly sensitive person and are still automatically forgiving, pay close attention to what you are feeling. Your internal reservoir is silently filling. Each forgiveness offered without true repair from the other side adds more. Every time you swallow what you really want to say to keep the peace adds more. Every time you justify unjustifiable behaviors adds more. At some inevitable point, it will overflow, and when it overflows, you will have no control over the process that follows. It will follow its own course. I am not saying to stop forgiving. I am saying to stop forgiving automatically without the other showing genuine remorse and real change. I am saying to forgive consciously and not compulsively. Second, if you have already gone through this transformation, know that you are not broken or damaged. You are whole, perhaps, for the first time in your life. What seems like coldness to others is merely the absence of an emotional reactivity that was never healthy in the first place. What seems like indifference is merely the presence of personal boundaries that should always have existed. You have not become a bad person. You have become a complete person. Third, if you know someone who has gone through this transformation, do not waste your time trying to bring them back. They will not come back. Their brain has literally changed at a structural level. The person you knew is gone forever, and the person who exists now does not owe you any explanation about this change. If you have lost someone this way, the only productive thing to do is honestly ask yourself, what did I do while this person was still forgiving me? How did I treat someone who was giving me infinite chances? Did I deserve all those chances I received? Because the answer to these questions is the true reason they left. It was not because they changed, it was because you never changed. Jung said that the shadow, when finally integrated, becomes a person's greatest source of power, and for the highly sensitive person, this is especially true. All that extraordinary capacity to feel deeply that was previously used to absorb the pain of others is now redirected, to create, to protect themselves, to build a life that finally makes sense, to exist authentically. Huberman would say that the brain has found a new balance, a much more sustainable balance in the long term, a balance that does not depend on constant self-sacrifice, a balance that preserves energy for what truly matters. The person who emerges after stopping forgiving is not a diminished version of who they were before. It is a finally complete version, a version that includes all parts, including the parts that spent an entire lifetime being denied and suppressed. If you are in this process right now, know that the darkness you are feeling is not the end. It is the integration. It is the moment when you finally find yourself completely. And on the other side of this temporary darkness exists a peace you have never known before. The peace of no longer needing to forgive automatically, because you have finally learned to protect yourself before needing to forgive. And that is true freedom, the freedom to be completely you, without apologizing for it.